What do you think when you hear the name Spider-Man? Do you think of a shy, quiet kid, an overconfident jackass, a kind-hearted boy desperate for everyone else's approval, a hot-headed douchebag who plans to rob banks and assaults people for money? I'm a massive fan of Spider-Man, and I have been my entire life, ever since I was a kid. I've read comic books my entire life. I've been playing Spider-Man games and watching the movies and cartoons. Spider-Man is one of my favorite literary characters. He probably is my favorite literary character. And in honor of that, I've decided I want to read through all of Amazing Spider-Man. And as I go through these books, I want to share my thoughts on them as I go through. So this is my thoughts on the first year one of the Amazing Spider-Man from Origin to issue 10. These are the issues collected in Masterworks Volume 1. And I got a lot of thoughts on year one, so I kind of wanted to make a video about that. One of the first things I noticed in these early stories is that young Peter Parker is quite different from what we in modern day would think of. In fact, everything about these early issues feels quite different. They are very much entrenched in the style of the time. So the style of stories, the plot, the art, the storytelling, everything about them is a little different. And I want to showcase all of this by going over the very first issue and the very first story in that issue ever, the Space Shuttle. The Space Shuttle story begins with Aunt May. She cannot afford to pay her bills, so Peter naturally wants to help her. First, Peter considers dropping out of high school and getting a job. He doesn't consider, just working the weekends or nights. He just straight up jumps into dropping out of high school. Aunt May tells him not to because that's stupid. So Peter then considers the next logical option, robbing banks. But he definitely considers it. He definitely considers going full Walter White. So since that doesn't work out, he decides to do what he did in the Origin issue and decides to do Spider-Man and shows for money. He gets a check from that stuff, but he can't cash it because he needs an ID to do that. And, he has a secret identity, so he can't show an ID. This leads to the issue cutting away to J. Jonah Jameson, who makes his first appearance in here, the first third of the very first issue. And, the first image of him is sitting over his desk, writing lies about Spider-Man and just talking about how he's going to run him out of town. Literally, 2 panels later, we see the very first time the iconic headline, Spider-Man Menace. No hyphen either. Jameson comes in immediately in issue 1, being the ass you know. In these early issues, Jameson is played pretty straight. He's kind of just a villain. He's not the lovable goof from like Raimi's Spider-Man. That doesn't come around until later. This whole ordeal makes Peter throw a tantrum, and he bangs at a wall and shouts about it. This ends part 1, because the first half of the issue, the first story, is split into 3 parts. So, after this, the very next page, we enter part 2. I don't really understand what the point of it is, but that's how these are split. So we begin part 2 with J. Jonah Jameson's son entering a space shuttle and going on a space flight. This flight goes wrong and the shuttle shoots off course. Spider-Man, no hyphen, springs into action and goes to save the day. He breaks into a military airfield, webs up a guard who tries to stop him, and then he hijacks a plane and, asks the pilot to fly it out to the shuttle. And the pilot does it because he believes that Spider-Man can help. Then Spider-Man jumps off the plane and onboards the shuttle. And this riveting cliffhanger ends part 2. And we enter part 3, the very next panel. Spider-Man fixes the shuttle in like a single page, and the whole thing lands safely. Spider-Man gets home, feels good about himself, and is kind of proud about the fact that he was able to do it, and now he can perform in public for money again, without Jameson ruining his day. The next day, Peter reads about the event in the paper, and he finds out Jameson has written a hit piece about him. Jameson accuses Spider-Man of sabotaging the shuttle so he could save the day. He accuses Spider-Man for breaking into a military air base and assaulting a soldier, which he totally did do. That's 100% illegal, and Jameson is 100% correct on that front. Spider-Man becomes unpopular for the things he actually straight up did, and now he's hated by the public, and we leave on that note. Damn. Now, you might have noticed that this entire storyline feels a little weird, and there's a couple of reasons for it. One, I'm not a very good storyteller. Two, the entire thing was written during the Silver Age of comics. Now, you might wonder, what is that? Well, around the 50s, I believe it was, the usual suspects came to the conclusion that comics will turn your kids gay and violent and it will corrupt their young souls. So, the comic book industry kind of lost that little debate with the Christian moms and, were put under strict censorship. This led to very strict rules about their violence not being allowed to be very extreme. There was no gore or sex allowed, and bad guys had to be put in jail at the end. You couldn't be sympathetic to their cause. This kind of censorship is what kind of defines this era of comic books. And, this is where it's like, if you think of like goofy Adam West 60s Batman, dancing, using a shark repellent, and like carrying around a bomb, this is the era where it comes from. The reason for that is very specifically censorship. Like, slapstick humor was all you could really do. So a lot of comic books play into that. They play into like the humorous side of it. The next thing that is worth noting that is that this was written in the 60s. It wasn't just the Silver Age of comic books. It was also the time of the space race. This was like, I believe pretty soon after Kennedy promised the United States will go to the moon by the end of the decade. So during this time, you can see in a lot of media people being excited about space and all the possibilities that come with it. Sci-fi was really popular at the time. The space hype is an important part of early Spider-Man's identity. At least I personally see quite a bit of that influence here. The very first story is about a space shuttle, not villains or anything neat. Spider-Man himself, while being a child, is a scientist in a sense. He's very interested in science. He builds gadgets. He creates antidotes, for example, against the lizard. Doc Ock is a mad scientist. And in issue 3, the Martians literally kidnap Spider-Man. Space stuff and sci-fi was a very big important part of this character, and I believe it's due to the era he was born in. And the fourth thing that is very notable about this comic book storytelling is that it's simply it's the product of its time. Not just Silver Age and Space Age, but it's just what comic books were. Comic books were specifically made for children. So at the time, this was meant to be read by pretty much exclusively by 7-year-olds. And it reads like that. It's very silly, very childish, very stupid. Because, like a 7-year-old doesn't expect better plot lines. The lessons and morals of these stories are very simple and strong too. There's another issue 3, where Spider-Man is beaten by Doc Ock, and he straight up gives up being Spider-Man. Like, he straight up quits, and it's like believes he can't do it. And then Johnny Storm has like a performance at Peter's school, and tells the kids that you should never give up, that always get back up. And by golly, it makes Peter realize he can just, try again. So he does that, he wins, and that's the lesson of the day. It's a very strong moral. And, it's a very much, something you wouldn't see nowadays in Spider-Man. The book is filled with text. I mean, just look at this. Like, my God. This is very much what books were at the time and would go on to be for a long time. Like, this amount of text, like, it goes down, but it still has a lot of text for a long, long time. Text is a very big part of storytelling of comic books for a long time. Visual storytelling really doesn't come into play until much later. It's like the amount of faith comic book storytellers have in their audience. It takes a long time to get there. So visual storytelling is relatively modern idea. While these books very much look like they're from the 60s and they read like they're from the 60s, and there's a lot of outdated stuff here, there's a lot of stuff that is very iconic to the character and still integral part of him. Like Peter in the very first issue, like, deals with money. That's like his motivating factor. He needs money. And, like there's conflict with his secret identity. J. Jonah Jameson, it's like literally issue number 1. He's here and he does exactly what you expect him to do. And it's like some of the iconic wordings that people still to this day like associate with the character, like Spider-Man being a menace. Like that's literally issue 1, baby. Like, that's here. Ditko's art. Spider-Man's costume hasn't really changed a whole lot. Like, there's more detail in it nowadays, but in it's like ultimately at its foundation, it's the same suit. J. Jonah Jameson looks like he does, as like back in the day. Going beyond the issue number one, like it's like a lot of these villains, they are still around. Like this era introduces a lot of iconic villains. Like the year one literally introduces Chameleon, Doctor Octopus, Sandman, Vulture, Lizard, Electro, and kind of the Thinker. Who is not iconic, but he is still around. Like it's like if you're more into the character, you've definitely probably heard of him or encountered him. Like some even a characters like the Enforcers, while not definitely not iconic, they have been adapted in like Spectacular Spider-Man. One of the most fun elements of these stories is that it's like Spider-Man's unique gimmick is his web tools, right? It's like he uses the web in a very creative ways. Like he uses like the web slingshot that is in Raimi's Spider-Man films, and he uses in the Insomniac Spider-Man 2 web slingshot. He slingshots himself across the city. Issue 3, it's here. Like web parachute makes an appearance. He defeats Doc Ock by shooting web in his glasses and blinding him. And then, there's like issue number one doesn't really cover it as much, but he deals with girl issues and school bullies. He has doesn't really have a much of a cast of characters honestly supporting him beyond like the a couple of girls and the Flash. And Flash, again, another iconic character, still to this day around. A lot of these elements were here from day one. The issues are quite experimental. Stan Lee and Steve Ditko didn't really have the character locked down yet. They really didn't seem to know what a Spider-Man story looked like, so they kind of wing it, try out different things. And that is like kind of the worst part of the year one. It's kind of interesting to see what they come up with, but a lot of these storylines are very weird. There's like, the shuttle story already, like probably while that storyline weirdly has been adapted multiple times, it is very not what you'd want to read from Spider-Man story. There are elements that have stuck around again, like J. Jonah Jameson. That is the most interesting part of this story, but like it's like like there are other story like where the Martians try to attack Earth, so they kidnap Spider-Man, which just isn't very good. As they go on, like Stan Lee and Steve Ditko start to get a more of grasp of what Spider-Man looks like. And while some early storyline look more like Spider-Man stories, like the Doc Ock issue, I think is a pretty close to a real Spider-Man story to me. Electro is issue number 9 is where they really get it down. To me felt like the very first issue where I was reading a proper Spider-Man story, fully formed, and there's no really buts or catches or what ifs. That it's just a good Spider-Man story, and it's like it's the Enforcer storyline was the other one, which is the right after that, and after that's the last issue I read here. The other one I would see an argument for is the Lizard. That one was also very much like a very bare bones version of what you imagine the Lizard to be. The storyline has evolved over the years, but it is the same exact storyline underneath everything that has been added over the years. It's exactly what you'd imagine it is. I don't know why, but it just still to me, it almost felt like there was something missing. I don't know what it was, but to me, it's like Electro is where it's like that is my favorite issue from the first year of stories, and that is the one that stuck with me. That was the one that I look back and say, yes, that one was the one. Now, even though these plotlines are really stupid, these are children's stories, and you can really feel it, and they were a little drag to read. I think ultimately what really saves these early issues and the moments that I was excited for was the characters. I was always down to see more Jameson and more of these scenes between Aunt May and Spider-Man. Stan Lee and Steve Ditko managed to capture a humanity in these characters that it's just really endearing to read. J. Jonah Jameson, for example, while he's played pretty straight and he's kind of almost a cartoonish character, he's kind of just a guy who hates Spider-Man, and there's not much to it. But in issue 10, they actually reveal why he hates Spider-Man. It doesn't seem to go anywhere, like, ever. But they do have a little 2 panels where J. Jonah Jameson explains why he is the way he is. And his reasoning is that he's a greedy man who's only interested in money. Spider-Man saves people, risking his own life for no glory nor pay. Every time Jameson sees Spider-Man be a hero, Jameson is reminded why he is not. He's a greedy, selfish old man, and he's ashamed of himself for being that way. He wants Spider-Man to fail so he can pretend he himself isn't so bad after all. And and it's great. It's really humanizing. I wish it went somewhere, but it's a great moment that does a lot to make the storylines with Jameson work better. Now, when you look at these villains, like these early issues have a good collection of villains. Some of them are more of a miss, like the Martians, but overall, like I honestly really think you can see the seed of humanity in all of them in some way, and they are really entertaining to read. And you kind of feel for them. Someone like Sandman, the reason why he's a villain is that he never graduated high school. So while his storyline is stupid, he tries to hold the school hostage and force the principal to give him a diploma, because he thinks that will work. It's really stupid, a childish story. But if you look past that surface level Silver Age shenanigans, he's a man who failed at high school. He dropped out. And, presumably, I'd imagine he has a difficult time finding a job since he's not particularly talented, nor is he a very smart man. So he ends up falling back on life of crime. It's a very humanizing character. It's a very human character. It's a very human character. The issue doesn't go into his backstory much, it doesn't expand on it, but the seed of a good character is already there. And it really helps elevate the character. And the action with him is great. His little body shaping thing is fun to read. And the art by Steve Ditko really makes it fun to go through. You look at Doc Ock. He's a brilliant scientist. He shows a little bit of ego at the start, but he shows no signs of being evil. And, then there's the lab accident and his brain becomes damaged, which leads to a personality change. And his ego that was already there now goes out of control. Maybe not fully out of his own. It's a story of a downfall of a relatively normal man, if not an egotistical one, by circumstance, and his own personality flaws. It's, I think, a really good story, especially for 60s when these characters have to be simple and very condensed. They managed to pack quite a bit of character in there. And on top of that, his ego is super fun to read. He believes himself to be supreme, and he really talks to everybody like he is a better human being than all of them. If you talk back to Doc Ock, Doc will hit you with the "you dare speak to me." It's really fun dialogue. I love his dialogue so much. There's the lizard, who's a family man turned monster, who Spider-Man isn't trying to defeat, but is trying to save. A lot of these villains emphasize their humanity in some way, or it at least is visible some way there. And this humanity also applies to, of course, Peter Parker himself. He has a kind of a Donald Duck quality to him, where he saves the day, but he doesn't really fully win in everything. Usually he has to sacrifice something, or he just can't get everything. Most of the time it seems to be respect that he lacks. He doesn't always know what to do. He already gives up being Spider-Man in issue 3. He ends stories talking about how hard it is being Spider-Man when everybody hates him. How ungrateful the world feels. And, he deals with money issues. A lot of these stories begin with Aunt May not being able to pay for her rent, so Peter tries to make money for her. Peter doesn't rob a bank because Aunt May could get hurt in that. And it's a very endearing relationship to read about. During all of this, Peter has to deal with bullies, mainly Flash and Liz, while taking care of Aunt May, while being Spider-Man, while being hated by everybody thanks to Jameson, while also trying to date Betty Brant. Yes, Betty Brant is a secretary from Raimi's films, and she is Peter's first love interest. She's the main girl he pies for. All of this is what you really expect from Peter Parker, and most of it is good here. It really does make for an engaging story, despite not definitely being the best iteration of this stuff. Betty is a shallow character. I generally have nothing to say about her. She's just kind of boring. Flash is a little better, but he is mostly played as a stereotypical bully. There isn't that much to him. He doesn't really have much of a backstory. He just kind of insults Peter every chance he gets. And, that's kind of it. They get into a literal fight in issue 8, or where Spider-Man beats up Flash. But there seems to be a seed of something more. Peter stops thinking about like school shooter thoughts and starts sounding less like an incel, thinking about revenge on the world, and he starts to look at the Flash and instead more, genuinely harmless way, thinking like, hey, I have a chance to mess with Flash, so I'm gonna take that chance. And this is the issue where he fights the Flash. He actually knocks out the Flash in a fight, and he's worried for the Flash. It's less cold and feels a little less random. Honestly, I've heard a lot of people describe early Peter Parker as an asshole, and he kind of is, definitely. But he's not that bad. He's more of a brat. I think brat is a better word for him. He lashes out in anger. He bangs walls when he gets angry. And he has definitely concerning thoughts. Like, he sounds like an incel school shooter. He's like genuinely one bad day away from shooting up a school. But considering he's like 15, he's been bullied for God knows how long, he's dealing with an insane amount of pressure from Jameson and the world, literally puts his life at risk and has all these things happening to him. I think everything he does is relatively realistic. Like, it's definitely like, I don't think Stan Lee has Peter's voice down yet, and I think it's clumsy. It's not as good. He's not as likable as he should be, but ultimately, I think it's a successful character. I ultimately do feel like I want to root for Spider-Man. I want him to be able to pay Aunt May's rent. I ultimately do feel for him and relate to him. Banging up at wall is a bit much, but like when he grabs Flash's collar ready to mess him up, it's genuinely human to me. This Peter Parker is definitely a hothead, though. He has like real anger issues, which that part to me is the most interesting thing I came across in these early issues. That it is those anger issues, that anger is something that has never really been adapted. Spider-Man sometimes gets angry in like the movies and video games. Toby yells at Uncle Ben in the car, right? And Holland wants to murder the Goblin. But neither get angry quite like this Peter, because there's a massive reasons why they're angry in those scenes. And it's like Toby's before is either angry over Uncle Ben's murder, or it's before he's Spider-Man, so he hasn't learned his lesson yet. And Holland, it's like, his family member just died, so of course he is feeling murderous. You wouldn't describe them as angry characters over something like that. Andrew Garfield, he comes closest to this kind of Peter, and it's like I actually really appreciate now how close the Amazing Spider-Man movies are to the original Peter Parker. But even his portrayal, I don't think quite comes as close to this anger this Peter has. This Peter is bitter, and he is angry, and it affects him. Like, he sometimes has struggles to control himself. He thinks genuinely mean thoughts about other people and, sometimes treats them worse. I can't think of a single version that I think replicates the anger this Peter has. And I don't know, I find that interesting. It's in a funny way, a unique take on Peter Parker. Overall, going through year one, I think year one of Spider-Man stories is a bit of a mixed bag. Like the plot lines I think are quite silly. Like, I enjoy Silver Age silliness, but I think it's very poor fit with a character who's grounded by rent and bullies and anger issues. I think there's way too much text in these issues, so it turns some of these storylines a bit of a slog to get through. And, to do that, the art, while, I think Ditko's character designs are amazing, I think his art is great. He's very expressive. But it's like, ultimately, it's like, they, in order to fit all this text, the text has to cover some of those panels. And the panels, like at the time, like they didn't use bigger panels. All these panels are very small. And there's, I think that's robbing Ditko's art some of its power. He's not allowed to do visual storytelling. And, like I've read some later issues, like I know he can do much better than this, but he isn't quite there yet. I think this high school cast, I think, is quite weak. It's one of the weaker casts of characters Spider-Man has had. Like Betty Brant is not that great. Liz is, again, another very poorly written female character by Stan Lee. Flash hasn't quite received the depth he would go on to receive later on. I enjoy him the most, but it's still quite lacking. Jameson and Aunt May are the two standout characters with the best dynamic, but even they aren't that fleshed out yet. They have a purpose and they serve it well. That's it. The villains are still a bit of a hit and miss. Like, half of them are iconic. Their storylines aren't that great. Like, Sandman is an iconic villain. I love the Sandman. Him holding a school hostage is not his best story. It's not even close. But the character is there, and I appreciate it. And I think what would go on to become such a great character, it's like you can see it, like you can see the seed in there. This proto Sandman. This is a proto Sandman, and I appreciate it. I enjoy reading these issues. And, if somebody wants to try them, I think they're worth a shot. Like, I think 60s issues in general are a bit of an acquired taste. So if that's scary, you might want to skip first year, as it is very clumsy. And, the later issues get a quite bit better. I believe the college issues are the better issues. But it's like, if you just want to start as early as possible, like, skip, like, to issue 11, I believe, is the next issue, which is the return of Dr. Octopus. And immediately after that point, these storylines get much, much better. It's like the year one is the weaker issues, as they're still trying to figure out. The moment this run ends, it's like they figure it out and they're so much better. Even Betty's not quite a shit of a character. Like within the next two issues. Now, the issues I read, like, they are collected into Amazing Spider-Man Masterworks Volume 1. You can purchase that and go through, like, even like the rest of the run through Masterworks, or you can get these stories through Marvel Unlimited, a subscription service that includes pretty much all the Marvel comics you'd ever want to read. Like, it's literally includes every single Spider-Man issue pretty much ever released. I find these early iterations of these characters and stories really fascinating to read. And, like, I hope I've managed to convey some of that here.